Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to Chapter 17. We're talking about fungi. We introduced fungi by saying that they're actually very beneficial. They create soil, they leaven bread. Leaven bread means it's not flat and the yeast makes bubbles. Leaven bread, make soil, ferment wine, make antibiotics. Fungi are actually very beneficial, though there are some fungi that are pathogens. Remember, pathogen is a blanket term that means something trying to make you sick. So there are some fungi that are pathogenic. Some are parasitic. Cryptococcus neoformans is a parasitic fungus that can infect the lung, the kidneys, your bones. Athlete's foot is a parasitic fungus. Ringworm is not a worm. Ringworm is a parasitic fungus. Yeast infections, jock itch. Jock itch is just a male yeast infection. Obviously, those are fungal parasites. There's even a species of fungus that will infect your sinuses and will grow root-like threads into your brain and give you splitting headaches. And if it's not treated, it can kill you. This shows what ringworm looks like. Ringworm specifically, it's in a ring like this because of how a fungus grows. We'll talk about how funguses grow in a bit. This is obviously athlete's foot. If you do a Google search for athlete's foot, you'll see some really, really, really ugly pictures. Really gross pictures. Athlete's foot. The fungus grows and tries to break down your skin. This is made worse by it staying moist. That's why it's called athlete's foot. Way back in the 20s and 30s, athletic shoes were 100% leather. Leather does not breathe. And so because the leather shoes didn't breathe, track runners, basketball players, football players, baseball players, they're keeping these athletic shoes on for hours at a time, and so their feet would get hot and moist and stay that way. Makes the skin easy for the fungus to parasitize. Most fungi are molds. When you think of mold, just think of bread mold. Molds are filamentous, which means they're composed of masses of thread-like, what we say, hyphae. You would refer to a hyphae, you would call a hyphae a root. But remember, we said in the beginning of this chapter that a root is a very, very specific structure. Its job is to absorb water, and that's pretty much it. The job of a hyphae is to absorb water, but its job is to release digestive enzymes. The hyphae are the combined body and feeding structure of a fungus. The hyphae, it does double duty. It's the actual body of the fungus, and it is a feeding structure. It releases digestive enzymes. The digestive enzymes break down any organic material around them, turns it into a soup, and then the hyphae will suck that soup back into itself, and then that's what it eats. That's what it breaks down. This picture right here shows, or these pictures show what hyphae look like. This micrograph, we can see it kind of looks like threads. It looks like roots. We see some mushrooms growing here, and these white spider webs that we see, that's the hyphae. And again, this looks like roots growing into the soil. They're not roots. They're hyphae. If we were to look at these things under the microscope, this is what we would see. How does that make it different from roots? It's different from a root in that this is the entire body of the fungus. This is not the body of the fungus. The mushrooms that you see growing on the surface is just a reproductive structure. It's the relationship between a rose bush and the rose. The fungus is a reproductive structure, the mushroom. The mushroom is a reproductive structure for the fungus. The fungus, the body of the organism, is this down here. Just like the bush is the body of the organism for the rose bush. The rose itself, if I go and cut the rose off, have I killed the organism? No, to kill the organism, I would have to go cut off the stem, right, where it comes out of the ground. Now I've killed the whole organism. If I just cut off the rose, I haven't hurt the plant dramatically, and it'll stay alive, and it'll keep making more flowers. It'll keep making more roses. The mushroom, that's just the reproductive structure. For the fungus, the body of the fungus, are these thread-like hyphae. That's the organism. Fungi can reproduce asexually through what we call vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation is if I were to take a shovel and dig half of this mass of hyphae and then go throw it on another pile of dirt somewhere, I didn't kill the hyphae. This part is still alive, and that part is still alive, and so now this part is growing somewhere else. That's vegetative reproduction, vegetative propagation. You just pick up some of it here and put it over there, and as long as there's food, it should keep growing. They can also reproduce through spores, and as mushroom spores, the exact same concept as a spore for the ferns or for mosses. The spore is the same idea. It is a haploid little clump of cells whose job it is to find the perfect conditions and grow and to make the next generation of the fungus. Our first group of fungi are called the Zygomycites. This is just a broad category of fungi. Bread mold are zygomycetans. They can reproduce asexually using puffballs. You've probably seen a puffball in your yard. Do you ever see those little kind of white leathery sacs sometimes growing in the ground? You step on it and it puffs out some brown smoke. Well, that brown smoke isn't smoke. That brown smoke are spores. The spores, again, it's inappropriate to say it's a seed, but if you know that a seed's job is to reproduce the plant, to make it to grow a new plant, that's the same job as a spore. Spore is to grow a new plant, but in this case, we're talking about it's going to grow a new fungus. Penicillin is from bread mold. Penicillin is a zygomycetan. Bread mold. Our next group of fungi are ascomycetans. These are mostly yeasts and some truffles. Yeast is not one species. There are so many species of yeast. Yeast is a single-celled fungus. Lots of species of yeast. It's not just one thing, which is why you have baker's yeast and brewer's yeast and a bunch of yeasts. This is what yeast looks like under the microscope. A bunch of little dots. Here is some baker's yeast, and then this right here is called a truffle. A truffle, the truffles that you buy in the drugstore, the Linder truffles, the things, the little chocolate things in the bags, that's not a truffle. It is called a truffle because it sort of resembles an actual truffle. An actual truffle is a fungus. Truffles are fungi that grow underground. Remember, most fungi grow in the ground. Truffles are a fungi that grow underground, and they're very expensive because they're difficult to find, and apparently they taste good, though I wouldn't know because they're really expensive and I'm a teacher. So, truffles.